Well, to dissect what Sunday's vote means for France and beyond, I'm joined for the next hour or so in the studio by France 24's Philip Turle from our International Affairs desk. I'm also joined by Andrew Smith, Senior Lecturer in Contemporary History and Politics from the University of Chichester. Andrew Smith, I'm going to start with you if that's all right. Macron's won with 58% of votes, a win certainly, but not as resounding as it was 5 years ago. Do these figures to you suggest a convincing second-term win for the incumbent?
It's a challenge, isn't it? And we can already see that his opponents have started to try and pick away at that. Of course, Marine Le Pen claimed a victory, not in the Trumpian sense of, ignoring reality, but in trying to trumpet the fact that her high score was, in fact, a form of endorsement. Likewise, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, of course, the kind of the third place challenger, essentially called the president poorly elected, weakly elected. And that really is the big difficulty. I think that was a note in Emmanuel Macron's speech, of course, in front of the Eiffel Tower last night, where he really acknowledged this idea that it wasn't something which was, a resounding endorsement. This wasn't, the same fanfare as 2017. It was a much shorter speech. And I think it was a real acknowledgement that there's some real work ahead and nothing is settled with the ballots closing last night.
And Philip Turle, Macron elected, of course, not a particularly popular president. In fact, a lot of people find him a very, very divisive figure indeed, but it must be said, not as divisive as Marine Le Pen.
He's never managed to forge this friendship and friendly image to the whole French people, even since his first election. Since he was first elected in 2017, many people have perceived Emmanuel Macron coming from the Rothschild bank as being rather aloof, rather too arrogant, not in contact with the everyday needs of most French people. And he was given this nickname Jupiter right from the start to make him understand that he was not aware of the problems that many French people were going through, particularly spending power, trying to make ends meet at the end of every month. And this has been exacerbated during the past 5 years, and really came to a head during the Yellow Vest protest movement in 2018, when thousands of people took to the streets around France to complain about an increase to begin with in fuel prices, petrol prices for cars, but this soon ballooned out into a much more general protest about the state of spending in France and the rising cost of living. And Emmanuel Macron's tried his best to bring in measures to support people and to make life a little easier, but this has not worked as well as I think he would have liked. And 5 years on, he's certainly won this election. Marine Le Pen has seen her score increase over the past 5 years to its highest ever level for the far right in France in a presidential election. Not enough to beat Emmanuel Macron, but I think it's a sign that people are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. It's better to elect the person you know. It's better to elect someone who is maybe more able to protect France on the international stage, particularly now there's a war in Ukraine as far as the European Union is concerned. I think there's still a bit of doubt about exactly where Marine Le Pen stands on all of that. But there is still, for many people, this dislike, this abhorrence towards Emmanuel Macron. And I think they have either voted for the National Rally of Marine Le Pen or they've quite simply just put in a blank vote in the ballot box yesterday.
And Andrew Smith, we are, of course, just a few days away from the 1st of May, May Day, the traditional Workers' Day. Are we expecting, do you think, a mass show of dissent, of distaste with the newly elected president on the 1st of May from those who did not vote for Macron?
I think it's almost a certainty. We've seen already in the run-up to the second round, we saw plenty of people from the trade unions, spokespeople already talking about a kind of rejection of Macronism, but then also this, Republican front against Marine Le Pen. And I think especially with this huge swell in voters around Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the kind of almost united left around his popular union, there's going to be a lot more pressure to sort of use this strategy of tension to make Macron's promises stand up to ensure that these aren't just sort of weak words uttered at an election, but they are things which are followed up on, and that some of these ideas around, perhaps a little bit more flexibility on pension reform, a little bit more flexibility on his investment in environmental issues, are not things that just sort of disappear as soon as the election closes. And so I think a lot of people will look, especially around Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And look, we've already heard Jean-Luc Mélenchon say that the next game, the third round, has already begun. And I think the streets are going to be a big battleground in that third round, especially as the left tries to unite and put pressure to try and elect many, many more deputies in the legislative elections in June. There's a saying in German football that the end of the game is the start of the game. As soon as that final whistle goes, you've got to think about the next game. And I think that's absolutely the case now. It is absolutely all to play for in the legislative elections coming in June, where we will see many more people angling to try and make Macron's life more difficult. And especially those people around Jean-Luc Mélenchon, trying to unite that big broad tent left-wing alternative and trying to kind of make sure they hold him to those promises that he's been making to try and win their support, or perhaps borrow their support during this second round election.